各位朋友，大家下午好，欢迎各位参加由 Mentorico 蒙科和组织隐形技能管理全球智库 GO-TKM 联合主办的隐性技能管理大师系列讲座50场。今天是我们讲座正好过半，也是第25场，由我们来自英国的 Stephen Dale 先生主讲。他今天给我们分享的话题是：你认为你能穷尽你所知道的，但这可能吗？好，首先我们来简单认识一下我们今天的演讲嘉宾。Stephen 先生他有30多年的从业经历，他是一位知识管理专家、变革管理专家。同时他创立了 Collaborate Now 这个平台。那这个平台主要是专注于开发协作环境，整合各种技术和流程。那它涉及到的领域呢，就包括知识管理、信息管理、大数据和人工智能。他同时也是商业信息评论这个杂志的编委，也是国际知识管理协会 KMI 认证的知识经理。同时在这么多年，他发表了很多篇跟协作行为、知识管理和信息技术有关的文章。那这些文章呢，我们 Stephen 先生今天也会跟大家就是有一定的分享，然后大家可以到时候可以找到，然后来阅读一下这些文章。那今天讲座的主办方是 Mentorico 蒙科和 GO-TKM。我们 Mentorico 蒙科是源自1981年的冠军头部企业服务商。那我们是专注企业导师技术与组织隐形技能管理的全球知名教育咨询品牌。蒙科的总部是在比利时布鲁塞尔，我们在全球有近600名顾问，然后在41个国家和地区，然后为各种各样的组织提供组织隐形技能萃取和企业导师传承相结合的培训咨询服务。蒙科中国是专注在国内本土市场开展企业导师制以及组织隐形技能管理的培训和咨询服务。我们也是欧洲导师与教练协会 EMCC 受证的中国唯一导师服务机构。我们也提供这 EMCC 认证的国际导师课程。那组织隐形技能管理全球智库 GO-TKM 是注册在比利时布鲁塞尔的非营利性国际智库。智库的成立主要是为了推动组织隐形技能管理在全社会的运用，推动人类的高效率学习。好，接下来我们就把今天的这个舞台交给我们的 Stephen 先生。Now let's warmly welcome Mr. Stephen Dale.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are. My name is Steve Dale. I'm from the UK, and I will be delivering a session today on tacit knowledge management. You think you know what you know, but how do you know, and is it right? There'll be an underlying theme throughout the slides, or many of the slides that I have shown today, which look also at trust and authenticity. Okay. So just a little bit about me. I'm the founder of Collaborate Now, an organization focused on developing collaborative environments, particularly communities of practice, and the integration of enabling technologies and processes, including KM, IM, big data, and AI. I'm a certified knowledge manager with the Knowledge Management Institute and the author of several published peer-researched papers on collaborative behaviours and information technology. Over a 30-year career, I've led over 40 major change programmes using knowledge and information management techniques and motivational learning strategies. Some publications include heuristics and biases, content curation, gamification, the art of collaboration, overcoming barriers to enterprise collaboration, creating a knowledge ecology for public services, and an old paper, 2011, but still relevant today, surviving and thriving as a 21st century information professional. So Today, this webinar will examine the meaning of tacit KM through the lens of storytelling. So, as I mentioned earlier, we'll also touch on the truth and accuracy and authenticity of tacit knowledge we consume, and how networks and communities can help us on our journey of learning and discovery. I think probably everybody now knows what tacit knowledge is. There's been a series of these webinars, and all of which have actually focused on various elements of tacit knowledge. So I put just for here in case anybody is not aware. So tacit knowledge is contrasted with explicit or propositional knowledge. Very loosely, tacit knowledge collects all those things we know about how to do, but perhaps not how to explain. The term tacit knowledge comes to us courtesy of Michael Poliani, a chemical engineer turned philosopher of science. So that's tacit KM. So I'll start with this story, the mechanical engineer and his hammer. And I think we all know this story, but just briefly, we'll just go through it again. So a giant ship's engine broke down and no one could repair it. So they hired a mechanical engineer with over 40 years experience. He inspected the engine very carefully from top to bottom. After seeing everything, the engineer pulled out a small hammer. He knocked something gently. Soon the engine came to life again. The engine had been fixed. Wow. 7 days later, the engineer mentioned that the total cost of repairing the giant ship was $20,000 to the ship owner. What? Said the owner. You did almost nothing. Give me a detailed bill. So he sent a bill which said, tap with a hammer, $2, nowhere to tap, $19,998. Now, it's a great story. But is it true and is it authentic? I did some research on this. The story is all over the internet and Facebook. Slight changes. I think there's one version of it where it's not a ship, it's an aircraft. But essentially, it's the same things. Somebody with experience comes along and knows exactly what to do, and charges a large amount of money based on, they're paying for they're making the customer pay for their experience gathered over many years. Perhaps it doesn't matter whether it's true or not, because it's a good metaphor for explaining tacit knowledge, i.e. the knowledge that we have in our heads, the knowledge that we accumulate through many years. So perhaps it's not a big issue whether it's true or not, but as I say, if anybody can find anything about this in terms of the name of the ship, the name of the engineer, when it happened, I'll be interested to know, because I've not been able to find anything. But I did find something during my research which it is true, and this is about a chap called Charles Proteus Steinmetz. Steinmetz worked for General Electric from 1824 to 1924, and he used complex mathematical equations to develop ways to analyze values in alternating current circuits. Ford Motor Company was having problems with a large General Electric generator. Their engineers could not solve the problem, so they called in Steinmetz. When he arrived, Steinmetz rejected all assistance and asked only for a notebook, pencil, and somewhere to sleep. Steinmetz listened to the generator and scribbled computations on the notepad for 2 straight days and nights. On the second night, he asked for a ladder, climbing up the generator, and made a chalk mark on its side. Then he told Ford's skeptical engineers to remove a plate at the mark and replace 16 windings from the field coil. They did, and the generator performed to perfection. Henry Ford was thrilled until he got an invoice from General Electric in the amount of $10,000. Ford acknowledged Steinmetz's success, but balked at the figure. He asked for an itemized bill. Steinmetz responded personally to Ford's request with the following: making chalk mark on generator, $1, knowing where to make the mark, $9,999. Ford paid the bill. So there's an uncanny similarity with the ship. The difference being there is evidence that this actually happened, and if anybody wants to go and look at it, it's an article in Smithsonian magazine. So it is true and is authentic, and it illustrates the same thing about somebody who has years of knowledge and experience being able to diagnose problems and charging the relevant amount of fee given their vast experience. So another story, which I can vouch for. In the UK, a long-serving police sergeant told his student constables to ignore the written procedure for a stop and search, which goes into several pages, citing his greater experience and demonstrating how he's always done it. Unfortunately, his method did not comply with the Police and Criminal Evidence Act 1984, PACE, and consequently, his student constables had to be retrained. So, here's an example of somebody with a lot of experience, but unfortunately, he hasn't kept his knowledge up to date, and he is passing on false information. And I think this is a theme I want to come back to about, how we identify trusted sources. He would have been a trusted source to the constables under his charge, but as I say, he was telling them or giving them wrong instructions. So just turning now to medical, the doctors and so on, how they've learned. So tacit learning has been around in the medical environment for hundreds of years, centuries. Predating any textbooks, doctors, and sometimes they weren't actually called then, they'd start with barbers doing the analysis of anatomies and so on. This is where the grave robbers had their day, finding cadavers that doctors could dissect and learn about the human anatomy. And all of this was done with people observing and dissecting. So learning by doing. All of this tacit knowledge, very little of it written down, but that's what ultimately created the textbooks. These days, their video recordings of operating procedures are used for training new surgeons, and consultant surgeons often invite peers to observe new techniques or even ask them to help with part of the procedure, i.e. learning by doing. All of this tacit knowledge. So medical professionals obviously require continuous learning. Things are changing rapidly. There's new techniques, new technologies to help them, including artificial intelligence, incidentally, where you can actually have now machines that perform part of operations and so on. Key thing here, medical education videos provide an effective solution since information is absorbed faster than text. And it's a platform that medical professionals can conveniently access anytime, anywhere. So it's a great training aid. Okay, I want to come on to a lady called Maisie Taylor. This is the story about a longhouse. Okay, so this is a medieval longhouse, and in those early days, these longhouses accommodated both the family and their livestock during the winter. So they'd bring in the cows and so on during the winter. They would actually stay in a part of the house, and then come the spring, the animals would be let out to graze on the grass. Now, Maisie Taylor was an internationally renowned wood specialist. You can actually search for her on the internet through Google or whatever, and you'll find information about her. Now, the longhouse that they were excavating, it was in Clyde Fen. She noticed that the wood used for the living quarters was pine, but the wood used for the animal quarters was alder. Maisie couldn't understand why two different types of wood were used. Both types of wood were prevalent in the area, so there's no particular reason why they should have chosen to use those two types of wood, and one for the living quarters and a different one for the animals. So that evening, there was one of the helpers, a young girl who was helping on this excavation, this archaeological dig. She asked her grandmother, and the grandmother said, she asked her grandmother about, why there'd be alder in the living quarters, and why they was using alder in for the animal quarters and pine for the human quarters. And the grandmother said, well, it's obvious. Pine wood sprouts new growth, and if the animals eat it, they will not produce milk. Well, this was new information for Maisie, that even though she's got over 30 years of experience, this is the first time she had come across this particular information about the difference or why they use different types of wood. So, I mean, what can we learn from this? So, I mean, one thing is that even experts can learn new things. And I hesitate to say, I would never call myself an expert because I don't know everything. Sorry, I don't want to say I don't know anything. I do know some things. So yes, experts can learn new things and probably need to learn new things. Go back to my police constable example, he was not keeping up to date with new information. I think the other thing is archaeology is primarily an explicit knowledge. There's many books and articles around archaeology, whereas farming is mainly passing on tacit knowledge. It's transferred from family to family, often around the kitchen table. Very little of it written down. So the third thing, bringing these two communities together can bring new insights. Bringing the archaeologists together with the farmers enabled Maisie to learn something new. And I think that's an important thing about communities. Tapping into communities that perhaps you wouldn't normally have access to. So when we look at ourselves and the networks, the world we know, so it's our work colleagues, it's our customers, our suppliers, our friends. This is the world we know. And there's another world out there, the world we don't know. And we don't know what we don't know. But tapping into other networks, as I said, can give us new insights, new knowledge. And there's plenty of opportunities now to tap into these other networks. We've got, we're all now hyper connected. There are many social media, the things we've got, you can crowdsource information by putting a little post up on Twitter or Weibo. There's TikTok, which can lead into other networks, LinkedIn. There's many networks that we can access. And I think that part of this is what I would encourage, if people are not already doing so, is to identify, perhaps through friends, what networks that could be of use to you. But there is a downside to this in terms of the networks that you go into, i.e. about trusting your sources. So just a brief thing about a chap called Arthur Kingsbury. At the time of his death in 1968, Arthur Kingsbury was a leading authority on British minerals. Kingsbury's reputation was tarnished by the fact that he had falsified many of the localities where he had found certain mineral samples through fieldwork. His mineral collections consisted of fake specimens mixed with diligently obtained specimens, making it hard to know which were true field discoveries and which were false. Now, before he was found out, he was held in great esteem. You know, he was an expert in the field of minerals. But it was only later on they found that a lot of what his collections were flawed, and consequently, could he be trusted to have said anything correctly? So knowledge, I think this is a powerful image. Knowledge from a trusted source is richer than what we can discover for ourselves. But how do we find those trusted sources? I hope this works. Just a warning on this, because there is some bad language at the end of this video.
No one is saying anything at any point in time, even if they would never say those things. So, for instance, they could have me say things like, I don't know, Killmonger was right, or Ben Carson is in the sunken place, or how about this, simply, President Trump is a total and complete dipshit. Now, you see, I would never say these things, at least not in a public address, but someone else would. Someone like Jordan Peele. This is a dangerous time. Moving forward, we need to be more vigilant with what we trust from the internet. It's a time when we need to rely on trusted news sources. It may sound basic, but how we move forward in the age of information is going to be the difference between whether we survive or whether we become some kind of fucked up dystopia. Thank you. Stay woke, bitches. We're entering an era.
Right, sorry about that. Okay, so I think many of you probably have heard about or come across deepfake videos. And I haven't got the answer to this in terms of, you know, how you find out who to trust. I think that we're entering an era now where authenticity and truth are ever more difficult to find. I think once you've found trusted sources, that's great, and you can pass that information on to family and friends. But I think we've got to be increasingly skeptical about the information we consume on a daily basis, to check it, to verify, to look for one or more sources that will validate and verify that information. I used to work for Reuters many years ago, and one of the things that Reuters did when they were reporting on a story, they were less, they gave less priority to being the first to publish any breaking news. What they cared about was the accuracy of the information that they were on their story that they were publishing. And they would verify and validate the story with at least 2 or 3 independent sources before they were published. So I think it's actually, we now need to be far more diligent about checking our sources for relevant information and the truth and authenticity. So I've shown here your personal or tacit knowledge management journey. I did a lot of work, I actually called it personal knowledge management, and Harold Yarch, who I've sort of borrowed or slightly tweaked the slide, talks about this circle. So, you know, finding trusted sources, filtering out the relevant information from those sources based on your particular area of interest, evaluating information and testing your assumptions. And this testing of assumptions, you need to be aware of your own biases. You're going to engage with peers and experts, gain insights about the knowledge that you are growing, this particular topic that you are interested in. Finding experts and gaining new insights from them. And then embedding this new thinking, you've added and adding value to it. And once you've added that value, sharing it with your network. And to be honest, this is really the ideal way of communities of interest or communities of practice work. Now, again, this is an old slide. I've repeated here because it's still the same issue. I've said learning and personal development requires a shift from hierarchies to networks and the empowerment of people to choose the tools they need to become more effective and more productive. And I think there has been a shift over the last 10 years or so, where organizations are allowing their employees to choose the tools that they need to do the job. The issue with hierarchies is in cascading information and knowledge down to different layers. They will filter what they send pass down. They may filter on various reasons. Perhaps the information is too sensitive to pass down. Perhaps it's some knowledge that they want to hold for themselves and not pass on. So a hierarchy is not the best way of sharing knowledge. Whereas a network should allow free flow of that knowledge and that information around the network. A network is a far better place to learn and to share information and knowledge. And most of my work over the last, at least last 15, 20 years, has been around communities or developing communities of practice. Communities of practice share a common passion for something they do and collaborate in order to learn how to do it better. And I want to mention Knowledge Hub because this is probably one of the biggest projects. I was the architect and project lead for this. Knowledge Hub is a platform for communities of interest, communities of practice, group sharing. It's predominantly for the UK public sector. It was launched in 2011. So it's been going for 12, 13 years. It's got 125,000 members on it and 2,000 groups, individual groups. Now, the thing about why I think this is so successful, I think it's the largest community of practice platform in the UK, or certainly for public sector anyway, is that when I was developing this, I insisted that it wasn't just the technology, that they recruited the appropriate staff to manage and facilitate the communities. And they have a permanent team of 4 or 5 people who manage this network, helping the various communities to share knowledge, helping people understand the technology they're using. And I think it's on those grounds, having this team there that will help the individual groups, the individual members, to make the most of that network as to why it has been so successful. And I say, and it's still growing. So the slide about collaboration, the art of collaboration, something that I put together in terms of what I thought was important. And you'll see the first circle at the top about authenticity. You are who you say you are. And I just go back to that deep fake video, you know, how do we know who you are? You have to, in some way, demonstrate your own authenticity. And then on the trust, you're happy to share with, you'll share your knowledge, or they're sharing this information with this person or these people. And the way that this actually works in terms of propagation and keeping it alive is the fact that you do it because you'll get some sort of recognition. Knowing what you are doing is appreciated by others. So at the heart of all of this is the passion you have for that particular topic. So I've been a member of a number of communities of practice, and I think the overriding thing that's in terms of my involvement is I believe in what I'm doing. I have a passion for sharing knowledge. I've shared a lot of knowledge. I did a lot on content curation, curating knowledge for other people to use. And I think the key part of this, as I put right in the middle, is the passion for what you're doing. And I learned this over a number of years with communities of practice, but the barriers. And I'm probably not telling you anything new here. Things like, lack of time to share knowledge. Do we have the time to share knowledge and identify who we want to share with? Fear that we may jeopardize our job by sharing something. Lack of awareness of the value of something that some knowledge that you possess. If you don't know its value, then you're potentially not going to be sharing it with anybody. I think also the dominance of explicit over tacit knowledge. People are far more comfortable in writing things down than they are in talking to people about it. So, and that's a difficult one to overcome, really. This lack of confidence of engaging and talking and showing people. Another one, the insufficient capture, evaluation of feedback, the tolerance of past mistakes that could lead to improvements. We don't want to expose ourselves or admit that we did something wrong. So you're not going to want to share a lesson learned. And that needs to be overcome as well. That's one of the barriers for knowledge sharing. Just a few more difference in experience levels. Perhaps you feel uncomfortable given the fact that you are new, that you don't have as much experience as other people in the network, so consequently you perhaps don't want to engage, or you feel vulnerable in engaging with them. Poor interpersonal skills. Okay, remember, tacit, a lot of it is around about social meetings, social networking. So if you've got poor interpersonal skills, it will be difficult really to engage and share. Lack of trust in people because they misuse the knowledge that you've passed on. And perhaps lack of trust in the accuracy and credibility of knowledge due to the source, i.e. you've heard something, you've found out something, but you're not too sure about whether it's correct. And lastly, differences in national culture, ethnic background or language. Okay, we all have different cultures, and some cultures find it far more difficult to engage in a social environment. And this is an extract from a post I wrote some time ago. So things about, obstacles in networking, sometimes you just have to jump in. But in any communities of practice that I've been involved in, is making sure people know what is permissible, what you can say and can't say. Knowledge is power. Why would I share? This fear of imperfection. You're not quite sure about your facts, so you tend to want to hold on to them. You don't know where to participate or how to participate. And I think this is where I'm going back to the K-Hub, that the facilitators are helping people with all of these sort of issues, to helping them to overcome any sort of reticence about sharing. Culture and work style, I've mentioned previously. Perhaps lack of trust in employee judgment. So perhaps there are managers around there and they do not trust what the employees are saying, so will not listen to them. So I just want to finish with this from Confucius. By by three methods we may learn wisdom. First, by reflection, which is noblest. Second, by imitation, which is easiest. And third, by experience, which is the bitterest. And I think that's absolutely true. As we go through life and we learn from experience, I'm sure that many people will have gone through tough times. I will just add one last sentence to this. My own is, I think knowledge can be borrowed, but experience has to be learned. So I will leave it there, and thank you for listening to me, and I will be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you for your wonderful sharing. And thank you for sharing the several stories that help us understand sharing technology. We should also care about the truth, authenticity. It's very practical. Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And now we can enter the Q&A session. 那非常感谢刚刚 Stephen 先生的分享。那现在大家如果有任何的问题，或者是说任何的想法想分享的话，我们现在就是把时间交给大家，大家可以把你们的就是想法或者是问题，可以在聊天框里，可以输在聊天框里，那我们会直接就反馈给我们的演讲嘉宾。Okay, hi Stephen. The first question. It's a simple question. Could you name some great communities of practice and or interest in CAM field?
Okay. I'll probably, I can't give a definitive list, but there's many communities of practice around the academic field. So if we've got a particular interest in any part of something you're learning, medicine, for example, though I can't give you the actual the name of the community, but I developed a community of practice for trainee doctors. And I think this was a few years ago, and since then I've come across a number of other communities around particular disciplines. So you could go to any discipline, you know, architects, doctors, shipbuilders, and you will probably find each of those somewhere. I've got a community of practice. The other communities that I've come across are in the area of development. There's a Ministry of Defence. I've got a community of practice to encourage best practice in the facilities that they're developing for the forces. So though I can't give you a list of all these communities, I can only show you that they're happening all over the place. And within the education sector, as I mentioned, the training doctors and so on. And if you look at any sort of academia, I'm pretty sure you're going to find there's somewhere in there's a community of practice.
How do you usually, as the first also ask, how do you usually find them through the internet? Just to put the keywords.
Yeah. Well, there's a few people on LinkedIn. I think going on LinkedIn, you probably find community practice there. And I think if you put a general term in for communities of practice, you're going to come up with loads and loads of things. To be honest, LinkedIn is probably one of the better networks I've found for giving, you know, good and accurate information. So if you've not already looked on LinkedIn to see what communities are active there, and through your own network, the people that are actually engaged in these communities will often share what they're doing and give a link to other communities. I would, having thought about it, I would just mention another one that I do that's very active in the UK, and that is Mumsnet. i.e. it's for mothers of new mothers or expectant mothers. It's a very active network, and it's information that's been shared by mothers who are having similar sort of issues with bringing up children, bringing up babies and so on. It's so popular that they're now a body which is able to lobby government, because I think there's about 60,000 members on the network. So if you want to go and look at it, and particularly, if you're interested in the fact that, you might be sort of bringing up children, it's called Mumsnet, MUMS.net.
Could you please put it in the chat? And it's Mumsnet, MUMS.net, right?
I think so. Wait a minute. Yeah, I think it's. Just bear with me a second. Let me have a look.
我们第一个朋友的问题呢，就是说，可能因为我们就是演讲嘉宾刚才在他的演讲里，因为多次提到了实践社群、像兴趣社群这种的话题，那然后这位观众可能就想知道，比如说我们在知识管理领域、隐性知识管理领域有哪些比较好的这个社群？那其实这个各个领域的这个社群呢，我们就是 Steve 先生呢，他没有做一个说具体的这个清单说列出来，但是大家可以就是去通过就是各种平台去可以搜索这个，比如说你的关键词，其实可以搜出很多出来。像很多平台，像比如说领英，这个职场的领英，它就有很多的这个社群，是比较好的一个就是寻找各种社群的一个途径。那就像我们平时可能在各个平台，就是都会有人分享，就是他们在可能他们这个，比如说这个社群这个圈子，他们分享他们在做的事，分享他们的观点，那大家都可以多多关注。就是我们自己也有各种平台去关注，有这样各种各样的社群圈子，然后能够帮助我们获取更多的信息。就是各个类型的，比如像可能有医学的呀，或者是可能就是人才发展方面的。我们最后 Steve 先生也推荐了一个是跟那个母亲相关的，是指那些也是有经验的人，然后分享相关的知识经验给没有经验的人。这个有经验的指的是可能已经有孩子的那些妈妈，然后把他们的这个育儿经验，然后传授给那些可能即将要就是传给那些准妈妈们。那这个，比如说这个网址，比如说就是moms.net，像那个如果是医学领域的呀，就可能是Training Doctors 这个平台，大家都可以就通过各种平台，可以各种方式来关注。
I'm sorry. It's mumsnet.com if you want to have a look at that. Not mums.net.
Yeah, thank you very much. And let's look at the second question. The second question is, could you share some ways to identify the authenticity of information on the internet?
Well, yeah.
Yes.
That's a great question. I wish I had the answer to that. How to identify authenticity? And it's like I said earlier on when we looked at the deep fake video, it is really, really difficult these days to identify authenticated information. But I will give you an example. If you're on Facebook, you quite often see somebody raise something, it's like a security alert of some sort, telling us, don't do this because it's a scam, and they'll put this out on Facebook. And what I've found is that people then copy that on and on and on because they think they're doing other people a favor. They're telling some, we don't want to get scammed, so I'll pass this on to all my friends, and before you know it, this one post has been sent out to thousands and thousands of people. Now, when I receive something like that, I don't take it at face value. you can actually go onto an internet and search for things like scam alert. And quite often it will actually list the actual Facebook post that you've been looking at, saying that this particular post is in actual fact a scam. It's not they're not alerting you to a scam. The post itself is a scam. So in summary, I think in terms of trying to identify authenticity is when you get something, try and check with your network, ask other people, have you come across this? Is it right? I've got to be honest, when I was invited to talk here, I did ask the validity of GO-TKM because I wasn't sure, I hadn't come across it before. So I looked at the website and I looked at the 3 or 4 people that I knew, and I sent them a WhatsApp message asking them about GO-TKM. And they said, oh yeah, it's a valid organization. So that's the only advice I can give, is that if you see something new, do not take it at face value. Try and contact people that you know who might have some knowledge about this to find out whether in actual fact it is real. Because the worst thing you want to do is, having read something or picked something up which you think, oh gosh, I need to tell people about this, and what you're doing is propagating something which might not be correct.
Thank you。那第二个问题呢就是关于我们在互联网上每天都会接受到大量的信息，然后因为讲到这个信息的真实性问题，就是我们的Steve 先生他能不能分享一些方式，然后能鉴别这些信息的真实性？那其实我们前面就是那个演讲中也提到，其实这个很难，就像刚刚我们那个播放的一个奥巴马的那个视频，也以为奥巴马说的那些话，但其实那些话都不是他说的。就举个例子，就是像比如说在脸书或者是我们国内的各个平台，大家经常会看到有人就是发一条可能推文，一条博文，然后一堆人可能有上千人在那转发，然后这个博文的内容可能说就涉及到一些，比如说可能一些诈骗信息，大家要注意，就是不要就陷入这个陷阱。那有很多人转发了。那其实比较有意思的是，如果你是自己再去搜索这个关键词的话，然后这个出来的词条呢会显示这个博文本身，这条推文本身它就是一条就是诈骗信息。那我的话一般会是遇到，如果说我看到一条新信息，我想验证它的真实性的时候，我可能会去问我身边的人，是可能对这方面有所了解的人。比如说这次就是我被邀请去参加我们的 GO-TKM， 其实在这之前，因为我不了解这个组织，但我知道就是有一些朋友已经加入了这个智库，然后也做了就是前面我也有就是我们的演讲嘉宾也做了这样的讲座，那我就是通过我的那个社交媒体工具，然后去联系上我的这些朋友，然后就向他们求证，这个组织它确实是真实存在的，它是合法的，而且它也确实举办了很多精彩的讲座那通过这种方式，我确信了这个信息它是真实的。就我也就是像大家也可以就是借这种方式，当你去看到新信息的时候，你可以去向身边的就是那些有这方面知识有经验的人，向他们去咨询。Thank you for the great answer. And let's see the third question. The third question is how to let the experts who fear of knowledge abuse share their knowledge.
Oh yes, that's another good question. How to let experts who fear knowledge abuse share their knowledge? I think if I've understood this correctly, experts who perhaps are reticent about sharing knowledge because they feel it might be incorrectly used. I'm not sure, to be honest. I think that experts themselves would, sorry, if I understood that correctly.
It's about the experts. They may hold some of the knowledge for themselves because they
Yeah.
fear that the knowledge will be abused. So
Right.
they will
Yeah.
not yet be fully open to share the knowledge. So,
Yeah.
but for organizations, they really want the experts to share their knowledge
Their
with
knowledge,
the
yeah.
less experienced person. Yeah.
Well, my own experience, when we talk about experts, it's I've got to go from my own network of people that I've trusted. And amongst those people that I trust, there are quite a number of experts. Obviously, my field is knowledge management. So my network is mainly consisted of people who I would think are expert in some aspect of knowledge management. And they generally do open up and share their knowledge. The only time they probably would withhold some knowledge is because they might be writing a book and they don't want to share too much about the book until it's published. So that's one valid reason. I don't know, out of all my network, I don't know anybody that would withhold knowledge because they would feel empowered by it. I generally feel that a lot of people are quite willing to share what they know. I used to run a workshop for Warwick Business School, and this is a member organization, so it was a trusted set of members. They were large companies. There was about 10 large companies, including people like Cadbury's and Severn Trent Water, a few others. And we used to invite experts to come and talk to them. And the general sense I felt from those closed meetings was that those experts would share anything. If you asked them a question, they would share anything. Primarily because it was a closed and trusted network. If we're talking about internet, I can understand experts not being entirely willing to share everything through the internet because it could be misused, or perhaps even the expert are not 100% sure about what they're sharing and consequently won't say anything, because once it's out there in the internet, it's free and it's wild. So, sorry, this is a long answer to that question. There's two parts to this. One is if you are in a trusted network, I found the experts there would generally be willing to share anything because they feel that their trust within that network. If you are talking about the Wild West internet, then yes, I think there's probably far more reticence about experts sharing knowledge. I'm hoping that might answer the question. I don't know.
Thank you. 第三个问题呢是我们有些专家可能就是在分享知识的时候，因为担心可能自己的知识可能会被滥用或者误用，然后呢对自己的知识有所保留。那这种情况下，我们该就是如何应对？所以专家的话，就是我所就是知道的大多数专家呢，他们就是非常愿意去分享他们的知识的。有些专家他可能就是保留自己的知识，比如说他有一本书要出版了，所以在那本书出版之前，他可能对他的这个知识可能是就是有一定保留的。那主要关于这个，我主要讲就是两种情况。第一种情况就是，当这个专家他是处在一个就是比较可信的这个就是人际网络里面，然后大家呢就是可能大家的兴趣各方面都比较的就是相似，然后呢这里面的就是人，大家就相关的人、相关的事、相关的信息呢，大家都比较可靠，就是有一定信任基础的时候呢，其实专家当然是非常愿意的去分享他们的知识经验的。像我知道的很多专家，他们甚至是愿意就是毫无保留的去分享的。那还有一种情况就是针对我们这种互联网上，因为互联网我们知道就是信息就是非常的多，然后呢可能会出现就是你信息被就是误用、滥用，甚至被扭曲的情况。那这种时候呢，就是专家可能在这种网络这种环境里面，他可能就不会说100%的去把自己的知识分享出来。这个就是看具体的情况，应该是看具体的环境而决定的。 Thank you, Steve, for your great answers. And considering the time, I think that's all for the Q&A, and also that's all for today's webinar. Thank you very much for sharing. And after the webinar, I will send you an email about our appreciation. I will let you know the audience, how many people watching the live webinar, and their feedback.
I see. I'd just like to say thank you for your wonderful facilitation as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and have a good rest of the day.
And you. Thank you. Bye-bye then.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
非常感谢我们今天的Stephen 先生的精彩的分享。那接下来我们做一下，就是看一下下期的讲座预告。下一期我们是在6月6号，然后由来自美国的 Josh Plaskoff 博士跟我们分享他与隐性知识管理的30年，是讲他自己从业以来的经历，他的经验，以及他对隐性知识的认识，以及这个认识的不断的更新和变化。那对这次讲座感兴趣的朋友，可以扫右方的二维码，然后报名参与我们的这次讲座。那另外呢，是我们今年的重磅活动，是在今年的9月3号到5号，我们即将在瑞士达沃斯举行第2届组织隐性技能管理论坛。那关于这次论坛的具体的信息和门票信息，大家可以点击我们的官方网址3w.GO-TKM.org，然后进一步的了解。同时也可以报名进入我们的可以扫码进入我们的这个报名意向群，然后可以做进一步的交流。另外就是在这次论坛期间，也是在达沃斯，然后在9月3号，我们即将同步举行绿色大奖 GLA 颁奖典礼。那这次颁奖典礼呢，是为了表彰在绿色学习方面取得重大成就的杰出个人和组织。那这次奖项呢，我们主要分为4类奖，分为有4个奖，有1个个人奖，还有3个单位奖。个人是个人贡献奖1个，单位呢有3个卓越实践奖以及 ESG 奖，还有创新奖。那绿色学习我们主要是说指是我们在组织环境内是保留有资深有经验的人士他们的隐性知识，然后帮助我们的年轻人士，就是那些经验较小的人士能够快速成长，目的是能够减少资源的消耗和从而改善绿色环境。那任何就是倡导、支持、促进绿色学习的个人和组织都可以参加我们绿色学习大奖 GLA 的评选。那我们就是评选成功的个人和组织呢，将被邀请到我们的就是达沃斯论坛现场，然后现场领奖。有兴趣，然后大家有兴趣并且有志向，就是愿意参与的个人或者组织，我们可以扫右下方的这个二维码，然后这里是这个绿色学习大奖的提名表，也非常欢迎就是各位能够倡导绿色学习的个人和组织加入我们。好，以上呢就是今天的讲座，我们非常感谢大家的参与，我们下期再见。